Everyone, welcome to another edition of Green White Checker. The round of 12 underway in the 2023 NASCAR Cup Series playoffs. The Auto Trader Echo Park Automotive 400 from Texas Motor Speedway. Obviously, Texas is generally one of those tracks that many people don't look forward to just because it has a reputation for it being a little bit more boring here of late. But today, not the case. Texas brought about a lot of chaos in a lot of different ways in this one. First off, you had the fact that it was hotter than Hades out there today, over 100 degrees, plus the heat in the car, and then coming up off the asphalt, it was probably about 130 degrees in those cars going around that track day. So you got to feel for those drivers that just, especially the playoff ones that are already under a lot of pressure to perform, having to go out there and deal with all of that heat. You saw BJ McLeod have a problem with his cooling shirt early on, and I bet that just wasn't a very pleasant experience for him. I know at one point they showed Kevin Harvick's in-car thermometer, and it was showing it to be like 125 degrees in there, and that was early in the race. So as the race goes on, it only gets hotter and hotter and hotter in those cars. So that alone would be enough to cause some crazy chaos, because I'd imagine in this heat, it would be very easy to have a slip up somewhere along the way when you're already under intense pressure. But early on, one of the biggest issues that seemed to pop up was right rear tires coming off. You had two cautions early on for those tires coming off. You had Austin Dillon, his came off, put him in the wall really hard and ended his day. Todd Gilliland had the same thing happen on the very next restart, ended his day. A lot of people are going to be asking the question here, why don't you see this happen in Indy and Formula One, since they both have the single lug tires as well? And you might also have a lot of fans that are traditionalists, NASCAR purists, whatever you want to call them. They're going to go, why don't they just go back to five lugs? This is a disaster. Simply put, the answer to the first question there is Indy and Formula One cars are open wheel, and they are a lot lighter than these stock cars in NASCAR. And so they're much more easily able to handle the weight being on top of that single lug tire. Also, answer to the second question about why they don't go back to five lugs. Well, with this design on the next gen car with the 18-inch rim on it, the 18-inch wheel, there's just no way that they can do that, because the 18-inch wheel hub is just too big for five lugs to be able to adequately secure. And so that's just impossible to really try to revert back to the way they were with the way these cars are designed. But the tire falling off really isn't a design problem or a NASCAR problem. It's an installation issue. It's not a design issue. I mean, think about it. This was a problem early on when they were first getting used to having this single lug tire, where we saw a lot of tires coming off, a lot of loose wheels because they weren't properly secured. Ever since NASCAR made harsher penalties on the pit crews for not properly getting them secured on there, getting them put in place, and ever since NASCAR mandated that the teams go through better training to be able to put these tires on, it's kind of become a little bit more of a rare thing to see these single lug tires fall off. So this may just be a working theory, but with the intense heat and everything, it's not outside of the realm of possibilities that maybe these teams were just kind of rushing to get the tires on in pre-race and didn't get them properly secured. Just a working theory there, and I don't think that this should be a big issue going forward. The concern will be if it does end up being the case, but I don't think it will be. And of course, what would it be in the playoffs without talking about playoff chaos? Had a lot of it today. We'll start with Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch, late in stage one, complained that he might have had a flat, and the team kind of thought it wasn't. It was just that on a restart, he got up into the marbles a little bit and got some dirt on his tires, and they were telling him that in a couple of laps, he'd probably be fine. That wasn't the case. Busch later got back on the radio, was talking about that the tire was chattering like it didn't have any air in it. And the team still was urging him to try to make it to the end of the stage break, so that for the sake of the points, because that's just how big they are at this point. Remember that Kyle Busch is a playoff driver and one that a lot of people are projecting not to make it out of this round. So stage points are big for him. Any kind of points he can get are big. So the team kind of urged him to stay out there on the track, and that was the big crucial mistake in the end, because it turns out Kyle was right. Tire must have been going down because he spun, he went hard into the wall, and then the damaged vehicle policy clock expired on him and ended his day. During the caution that followed that, Denny Hamlin and Ty Gibbs got together on pit road. Not sure exactly what was happening. Denny was just kind of coming out of his pit stall. Ty Gibbs is trying to get into his. I know their stalls were close to one another, but Ty, even though had plenty of time to react and he saw Denny coming out, he still basically almost drove it right into Denny's right side door, and that tore up the steering on Ty Gibbs's car. Ended up ending his day. Denny Hamlin, it didn't seem to affect any. He ended up going back out on the track, and it seemed like Denny was honestly even faster, despite what should have been an aero concern for him, because Denny Hamlin was one of the top 3 fastest cars on the track at one point in this race. But Denny goes on to finish, and Ty Gibbs' day ends because of it. Martin Truex Jr. Poor Martin Truex, I tell you. He is, for the regular season champion, he had built up such a nice little cushion through the first round. He almost had his own little insurance policy with the regular season championship points and everything that gives him. But he basically burned all of that just to make it to this round. And now, after a rough day today, Truex, he spun out there on the last lap of stage 1, ended up having to come down a pit on a closed pit road for 4 tires, and he just never rebounded. He had a lot of long pit stops. He just kept complaining that the car was slow, not driving real well, and it just puts him in a tough spot right now because he finished 17th today. That would be respectable if it was the first round, but here, trying to get into the round of 8, that is not going to be the case. This may put Martin Truex in a situation where if he doesn't win a race going forward, or if he doesn't just absolutely drive for his life over these next 3 weeks and turn his luck around, you may not see Martin Truex Jr. moving on to the next round. So he used every bit of his cushion there in the last round just to get through, and now that the playoff points have reset, that took away basically half of the cushion that he would have had. So he is now down to the back of the back there, possibly about to drop below the cut line. Ryan Blaney, just another interesting day for him. He was penalized for speeding on pit road after he was running in the top 5 there. I think this was in the second stage. He rebounded, and thanks to his strategy, took a 2-tire stop late, ended up getting back up there into the top 5, but later on in the race, he was caught in a big one, so to speak. Tyler Reddick bounced off the wall. It caused a little stack up behind him because then Eric Jones hit the wall. Blaney was behind him. Then right in the middle of the front straightaway, it caused a big mess there. Broke Blaney's toe link. He ends up finishing 28th, 9 laps down. So not a good day for Ryan Blaney. Luckily, Ryan Blaney runs really well at Talladega. We know he's a good super speedway guy, so he's still got a chance to maybe either win next week and advance to the next round, or have a really good day and hopefully get back on the ball. Kyle Larson, this is probably the toughest luck of the day. He had clearly the fastest car all day long. He would have easily won this race. He was in front by over 6 seconds at one point. It seemed like he was running away with it after he won the second stage. And then after a late restart there, he was racing with Bubba Wallace for the lead with about 20 laps to go. He got loose, kind of dive bombing it there low into turn number 1, and he couldn't recover. The car went around on him. He went all the way up the track. He couldn't slow it down, slammed really hard with the back end of the car into the outside retaining wall there in turn 1, pancaked the back end of the car in. Next thing you know, he has to come down pit road, and they couldn't get it fixed. Damaged vehicle policy clock expires on him. He finishes 31st. So tough day for Kyle Larson. He is right now, though, just barely below the cut line. So I think Kyle Larson stands a really good chance, especially since he has been one of the most consistent drivers all season long. Like I said last week, him and Denny Hamlin, if you were to make a shoe-in right now to be in the championship 4, they would take up 2 of those spots because they've been the 2 most consistent all season long. I do think Kyle Larson stands a pretty good chance of rebounding from this and getting back on track to be in the championship 4 there. And then, last but not least, Bubba Wallace had the pole coming into today after racing his tail end off just to make it into this round. And had a chance to win this one after the Kyle Larson incident. He led a career-high 112 laps today. Then 6 to go. Comes a late restart. William Byron gets a heck of a run going down the backstretch with 3 to go. He used that momentum to go by Chase Briscoe for second, and he was still carrying that run into turn number 3. Bubba was running up on the high line. Bubba tries to come down late and block him, but it was too late at that point. He pretty much was already up underneath him, and then coming off of turn 4, Byron just blew right by him and ends up going on to win the race. So tough luck for Bubba Wallace as he ends up falling back to 3rd, but still a good day for Bubba Wallace, a good points day. Sure, Bubba's very disappointed. He thought he had this one in hand. He let it slip away, but Bubba still got a good shot at still advancing to the next round so long as chaos didn't get a hold of him at Talladega or the Roval over the next couple of weeks. And last but not least, back to William Byron winning this race. That's his 6th win of the 2023 season, and that's a 300th Cup Series win for Hendrick Motorsports. So congratulations to those guys. That's it for the Texas Round of 12 opener. We'll move on next week for some super speedway racing that's sure to be extra chaotic at Talladega.